Thank you for taking time to watch How to Manage Your Records and Save Big on eDiscovery, provided by the Corporate Counsel Learning Forum. My name is Kirk Snyder, and before we get started, I want to give you a preview of what to expect in this video. The length of this learning session is approximately 18 minutes. In this learning session, I will discuss the impact of poor housekeeping on the cost of eDiscovery, the advantage of a copy and move legal hold protocol compared to a hold in place legal hold protocol, the role of the legal department in an information management housekeeping project, and I'll provide examples of low-hanging fruit data that could be quickly eliminated and the benefits of a secure document repository. Obviously, we can't answer all of your questions in a pre-recorded video, so please use our scheduling app located on the Chorus Consulting website at chorusconsulting.net to secure a time to discuss your particular situation. From my more than 25 years of experience working with organizations to mitigate their information government risks and litigation eDiscovery requirements, I see many common scenarios with large, medium, and small corporations. For example, ambiguous or overlapping legal holds. When I ask business unit leaders why they're saving so much information beyond the regulatory requirements, I often hear them say that they aren't sure if a legal hold notice regarding a certain employee or document type has been lifted, or they tell me that they have received several legal holds from the law department that apply to some part of the data already on hold. So they are waiting for instructions from the legal department before deleting anything. I also see confusion about record retention protocol. For example, is the paper printout considered the record, or is the electronic file, the source of the printout, considered the record? Is an email a record? Is the email attachment a record? Where are documents and email with record value supposed to be stored or saved? And how long must documents or emails with record value be saved? Once again, when I ask department subject matter experts why they are saving a hard copy and an electronic copy of a document with record value, they're unsure what the law requires, or they say, this is the way I was told to do it. But the single greatest cause in an organization saving unnecessary information is clearly duplicate or redundant copies. I see the same electronic file stored in multiple places on a shared server. I see the same file that is stored on the shared server stored on a cloud application. I see the same file saved as a hard copy printout stored in a filing cabinet and perhaps also in offsite storage as well. Not counting backup tapes, it's not unusual to find a single document with record value stored in 5 or more locations or formats. The data from this slide are actually conservative. From my personal experience, 70 to 90% of a typical organization's electronically stored information and hard copy documents are unnecessary. Only a small percentage of stored documents and email are typically required by law or regulation, have business utility, or subject to a legal hold. And the volume of stored data increases every day, and the data volume has a direct correlation to the cost of eDiscovery. Imagine that your client tells you that they have saved 1 megabyte of documents for you to review. No problem. If printed, the volume would be equal to a ream of paper. Imagine that the client has preserved 1 gigabyte worth of documents for you to review. Quick calculation, 1 gigabyte is 1,000 megabytes, and if printed would be the approximate length of a basketball court. However, the challenge begins when the client says they have collected 1 terabyte of user documents, because a terabyte is 1,000 gigabytes, and if printed would be the approximate width of Long Island. Now, what are the resources and headcount required for lawyers to review 1 terabyte worth of documents? And heaven forbid, at what cost? So you get the picture. The greater the volume, the greater the cost. Now let's talk about what can be done to reduce the volume and lower the cost. You can't let legal holds stand in the way of data housekeeping. Of course, organizations have a duty to locate and preserve potentially relevant information specific to a litigation, but there are 2 ways to comply with the legal hold obligation that can have a drastic impact on how and where business units discard redundant, obsolete, or trivial documents. The most common legal hold is a hold in place. That is, the legal department instructs employees to save and do not delete certain documents within their possession or control. On its face, this preservation method is the least expensive, but interrupts the normal course of business retention and destruction schedule, and over time can increase document administration and storage costs. The second type of legal hold protocol is a copy and move. This is where potentially relevant materials are identified and copied in a forensically sound way to a secure storage device. This protocol frees up business units to save or destroy documents in accordance with the department's normal retention schedule. While this method might sound expensive because it requires a secure litigation server, the cost is insignificant compared to the cost of an unnecessary and excessive document review by outside counsel. Take a look at your current records retention policy and schedule. Does the retention policy clearly articulate what documents and email are to be considered the records? Where the records are to be stored? In what format? For how long? And who has responsibility for records management? And by the way, format is critical. If business records are maintained in both hard copy and electronic formats, you are guaranteed to have elevated eDiscovery expenses because there will be duplicates. There will be offsite storage, and perhaps you'll be required by opposing counsel to digitize those hard copy documents before producing them in discovery. Take a close look at the department level record retention schedule. Do they have a complicated grid of record titles and retention periods? These retention schedules were appropriate back in the day when organizations had a tightly controlled records room in the basement, but in today's digital world they are obsolete, very cumbersome to maintain. Do the schedules indicate that some records are to be maintained off-site for some period of time? If so, your retention schedule needs to be reworked to eliminate the long-term retention of hard copy documents. Nothing dries up the cost of eDiscovery like manual review of boxes of hard copy documents only to discover that the electronic version of that document was readily available. By the way, when you have maintained hard copy and electronic versions of a document, which version of the document is the best evidence? Perhaps you're obligated to allow outside counsel to review and produce both versions to the opposing party. This can't be cost effective. A data project will take teamwork, and the legal department has a key role in the project. But to be successful, you must have buy-in from the executive management and partner with the IT department and business unit leaders in order to change the current landscape of information management. Although it's not a hard sale, the legal department must convince executive management that maintaining redundant and obsolete information in multiple formats not only multiplies a litigation eDiscovery budget, it also increases the risk of a negative outcome. And therefore, you will need their help in reducing costs and risk to the organization. Although you may not have a ton of experience in this area, Another important role for the legal department is drafting a new records and information management policy and schedule. We really don't have time today to discuss the detail and full content of the new policy and schedule, but I will mention two key points. The retention policy should state that, quote, records will be maintained in electronic format, end quote. And the new electronically stored information retention schedule should be drastically simplified, perhaps just 3 retention buckets: permanent, 10 years, and 2 years. Some users will still use hard copy documents for their short-term convenience, but the new policy should make it clear that there's no need to send hard copy documents to offsite storage because they should not be maintained for more than, say, 6 months. Once your organization's information is confidently maintained in digital format, identifying records, identifying documents with personal information, identifying contracts, identifying duplicates and near duplicates, identifying and preserving eDiscovery becomes manageable and efficient. The heart of the data housekeeping project is an enterprise-wide inventory. What are you saving? Where are you saving it? And in what format? To create the inventory, business unit leaders will need to identify a subject matter expert, or SME, within their departments familiar with the department's operating procedures. Each department's SME will create a spreadsheet document that identifies the department's main document categories and the document types within each category. If they utilize a shared server, what are the paths to the directories and what information is being saved within those folders? Perhaps they're also using cloud applications such as Salesforce or SharePoint TeamSite. Are they maintaining hard copy documents? If so, what document types and where are they being saved? And if they're maintaining hard copy documents, is there an electronic version that is also being maintained, and if so, where? The next slide may be difficult to read, but it illustrates what a department's SME inventory might look like. Column 1 is the name or description of the files. Column 2 is what format or formats they're being saved. For example, paper, electronic, microfilm, etc. Column 3 is what location they're being stored or saved. For example, what file cabinet, what offsite storage repository, within a shared server, what directory or folder, or what cloud application. And finally, column 4 indicates the name of the person within the department who could be considered the custodian for these records. These SME department inventories will reveal some very interesting information, but it's only part of the picture. To really understand the breadth and depth of unnecessary information that is being saved within your enterprise, you'll need to involve the IT department. They can employ an automated utility that will scan each storage system, whether local or remote, and quickly create a metadata index of each document, email, and attachment. If your IT personnel need assistance with this step, please have them contact me. We use a variety of software utilities depending upon the number of electronic storage devices to be inventoried, whether they are local or remote devices, and depending upon which operating systems are involved. From the ESI inventory, one client found duplicate and/or outdated contracts saved in multiple formats in multiple locations. The legal department thought they had all of the final versions of all contracts saved within a special contract database repository in a PDF format. And they indeed had most of them, but were missing a few that the purchasing and sales departments had failed to forward. But they also discovered tons of duplicates in Word format and PDF format. Duplicates were saved on the shared server space used by purchasing, as well as the space used by the sales department. They discovered that some contract types were being saved within a third-party cloud application. And they discovered that a paralegal in their own legal department was saving every contract earmarked for the contract database within her special folder on the shared server. As a matter of fact, contracts were being saved in electronic format in 5 separate locations within the enterprise. Imagine the work effort and expense for outside counsel to unravel all of this stored information if it were subject to legal hold. The 30,000-foot view of the organization's stored information, electronic and hard copy, on-site and off-site, will be a valuable and worthwhile exercise. I think you'll find some business units are excited and cooperative in getting rid of unnecessary information, while some other departments will argue or drag their feet. My advice is to study the information inventory and identify so-called low-hanging fruit that can be quickly and safely discarded. On this slide, I have listed 9 examples of stored information that I have seen clients discard without an in-depth analysis or debate. For example, with a revised record retention policy calling for all records to be in searchable electronic format, business units can rethink their need for offsite storage. Trivial files and emails can be identified based on their full text content, email addresses, title, age, size, or owner account. Housekeeping is more than just destroying or shredding documents. Before any wholesale destruction of stored information takes place, your organization must identify and save documents subject to legal hold or documents that have business value or required by law or regulation. During housekeeping, you'll have the ability to save documents with regulatory compliance value in one centralized location, while eliminating multiple versions and maximizing data privacy and security. And of course, destroy, shred, and discard unnecessary information. This phase of the project will require each department's SME to take a close look at their inventory of electronic and hard copy documents and identify which digital documents should be saved as a record, as well as any hard copy documents with record value that will require scanning into digital format. To avoid each business unit from maintaining their separate copy of important documents on the shared server, and to protect confidential or proprietary information, and to create a legally defensible records retention schedule, the IT department should implement a secure records application. There are many options from which to choose for either an on-site or a cloud-based repository. Microsoft's SharePoint has a record center option. OpenText is a very popular repository application, and I've been very impressed with how a company called mFiles classifies and manages records. Needless to say, there are many options. Regardless which repository application you choose, I have listed the important benefits on this slide. Documents are stored once, and depending upon your credentials, users can search, view, copy, edit, or delete a document. Users search by keywords, custom tags, or folders. Documents or folders can be tagged for normal retention or for legal hold. You can easily locate, hold, or collect materials required for eDiscovery. And finally, enhanced audit trails for collection defensibility. The final step in a data housekeeping project is training the users. If you fail to train the very people who are identifying and managing the organization's important information, you will likely have to repeat the housekeeping process in 24 months. There are 4 important protocols to incorporate into your training program. Train every user, document your decisions, audit the results at least once a year, and provide feedback to ensure compliance. A wise information governance professional told me, if you don't measure it, they won't treasure it. At a minimum, the concepts that you should teach are: what documents and emails do you consider as records? in what repository a record is stored, before moving a record to a repository, what tags, keywords, or folders should be applied to the saved records, and finally, who is responsible for disposing of documents and email without record value. I'd like to close this presentation with a few final thoughts. Leadership from the legal department is important for these data housekeeping projects because knowledge workers often blame legal because they don't know what to destroy. Cooperation with IT and the business units is mandatory. They own or are the SMEs of the data. The worst offenders will resist change, while others will be champions. Start with the champions. There will be low-hanging fruit that can be eliminated virtually overnight. And finally, the data housekeeping project will lower the cost of litigation eDiscovery and reduce the risk of legal or regulatory noncompliance. I would like to thank you for watching How to Manage Your Records and Save Big on eDiscovery, provided by Chorus Consulting. I hope you found this information useful. If you have any questions or feedback, please contact me at the email address on this slide.